the House conferees are back from their roll call vote, and so we're going to continue our work on the Committee of Conference. And our next document that we're going to be looking at was one that we got to just before we had a break, and that's our capital expenditure cash fund.
No, we were going to do the C-102.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one, sorry. So fiscal year 2022 unallocated reserve. So this was the companion piece.
This is the companion piece. It is not a completed amendment, but it's the start of the amendment for this C-102 section. And on the first page, you see down in number 5, this is the language is exactly the same as it passed the Senate, where the $25 million that was in BAA for improving the debt position of the state, the Senate is specifying the $5 million for the property management and the $20 million for the callable bonds. That's what's happening in 5. Number 6 is the companion piece to what we 6 sub A is the companion piece to what we just talked about before you had to go to the roll call. We would be striking out all these A, B, C, D, E that existed in the budget adjustment because these are the ones we really can't swap because the agencies have already spent into these appropriations. But we are adding the $6 million for DCF for the child care providers. This is exactly the same language that was struck in the other amendment.
And here too.
Yeah, that was a food bank piece up there, but the new sub A that's after the 5 struck out items, it should be underlined, I guess, or we'll work on the formatting so it's proper. But that's what you see in the A that is $6 million for it's now not a swap, it is $6 million of general fund for the child care retention program. And then because you have to keep into the $25 million of capacity in this sub 6, what you see in sub B on the next page would be moving $9.6 million that you have on the ARPA list related to judiciary. This is the reopening and the HVAC and the county courthouses. Move those off the ARPA list and do those as general fund contingent. And then you would have another $9.5 million within that $25 million block to expend. And this is highlighted yellow, and it stems from the conversation you had when you walked through the ARPA sheet of a desire to add additional funding to the water projects list, because there was a difference between the House and the Senate in the level of funding, particularly on the municipal in the small municipal water and wastewater overflow items. And then I've also highlighted, this is more of a conversation for tomorrow, whether or not additional items, particularly workers' comp, which you talked about yesterday, moving into this contingent section, IT modernization, particularly the DMV and phase 1 of the UI and the IT modernization fund, and then potentially the cash fund, which is the next conversation. Sub C is the same as it was in the Senate and the House. This is once you get done with whatever the list is, wherever we end for FY22, anything that is unallocated above sub C would simply stay as a balance in the general fund and carry forward from 22 to 23.
Stephanie?
Yep.
I'm just trying to think through the HVAC in the courthouses. Am I understanding right that there's a problem with using ARPA funds for that? And
no, it was just a way of, because we have to leave the ones that we struck out as ARPA dollars. It's just about moving an item of a dollar amount from one column to another because the capacity gets tightened.
No, I get that, but we would be moving it to the contingent list?
The contingent general fund list, yes.
Right. I'm just wondering about that because opening HVAC in general always struck me as, in terms of educational expenditures, but also courthouse expenditures, it just seemed like the best use of the federal pandemic money.
You could make, I did this just by trying to come up with a $25 million block. You could make other choices, a different item off the ARPA list to bring over.
Yeah, I mean,
I just went out of the G300 section to do it.
I think in talking with the chair, my sense is that the contingent list will wind up being an actuality.
Yes, yes.
So I don't worry about it so much from that point of view, but you know, we have had courthouses that couldn't operate and therefore judges that threw out actual cases. So we've had not just embarrassments to the system, but actual collapse of those, you know, long-standing cases. So I find myself a little hesitant to go along with making it contingent unless we're, you know, relatively positive that it's going to get funded.
Well, I think at this point, with our sense of revenues, we don't need to worry about that.
Okay.
And this was the first cut, remember in the BAA of the swap money? And
Yeah.
as we were trying to unswap the swap, we found out it wasn't that easy because in some of these appropriations, they'd actually started spending. And to back out that spending and charge them, not charge them. So that's why we were trying to find expenditures of a comparable amount to get to the 25 million to be here. So it's more of a budgetary exchange, and I think we're very confident that there's not an issue that the money will be available.
Okay.
Can I explain that okay?
That is, and so this would be if you're comfortable with the B, you still have work to do of, you know, which pieces of the water lines might get more money, if that's the desire of this committee to spend money there, and then other items.
You said there was another million that went with the 9.5.
Well, there's $1 million, there's $1 million on the ARPA list, assuming you do this, assuming you move the two big IT projects over, you would have $1 million, also assuming there's some other assumptions, like the $10 million being added to 518, et cetera, for the municipal, potentially beefing up that investment, the revitalization program. You would have still another $1 million in ARPA to expend as well. But as you walk through the money again tomorrow, that's where you would sort of start to
And
make
we're kind
those
of
questions.
revisiting some earlier discussions because we had 94, I think it was, for water. The governor had less and the House had 107. And this would bring it up to like 103 or 104. So that was where we sort of felt we'd like to end up. And then on the 518, we were talking about bringing that from 35 to 45. If we can make this money work, and that's what we're doing here. So
sounds like a plan to us.
okay, and then obviously we're going to have, you know, within, I guess within, we'll have to take a look. You had 107 for water quality. We'll have to go in and figure out which lines we alter a little bit to get to that 104. And
If you, Senator Kitchell, if you would like, I can tell you where we are on that. That may just take one chunk off the table.
okay,
So agreeing with the Senate construct, except in A2C, so we're now in the G700 water and sewer investments. And in A2C, the Department of Environmental Conservation, let's see, we were at 15, you reduced that to 10. We would increase that by 3 million. And at the line right below it, again in DEC, municipal wet weather sewer overflow, we were at 30, you reduced us to 20, and we would raise that by 7. So 3 in the rural public infrastructure and 7 in the municipal sewer overflow, and that would be 10.
So what we would be saying here is you would do 9.5 of that 10 in GF money in the contingent list.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about ARPA money, the remaining.
We're talking about ARPA, but this piece of the add back here, because of the way the different pieces are, what's happening with the swaps, the capacity is now on the GF contingent list to add back some of the water.
I'm confused.
Well, we're trying to free up, remember the 25, the ARPA money, for kind of what we end up in.
It's just about staying in balance in total in the ARPA. And so in doing that, the 9.5, or you could do it as $10 million here as well, is what you would do it here in the C102 section, as opposed, we would reference it in G700, the additional monies, but you wouldn't actually, the appropriation would happen here in C102.
In the same G700 section.
Is that a good idea? We're having a conversation among ourselves since I was confused, obviously.
Well, we can work out how we want to.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
As long as
Sorry.
you can identify where you'd like to close the gap and how you want to, what you just done, then we can finalize it. So thank you. You've already identified where you would take it from and
Where you would apply it.
yeah.
And that means that these programs would be a mix of ARPA and general fund, and that might be beneficial if there are projects that have a harder time getting through Guidehouse or ARPA than other projects. I
Sort
don't
of like
know.
housing then, huh?
Yeah.
That would actually be better.
But
I'm gonna need to think about that a little bit in terms of, there may be other places that
There are lots of options within this. If there's other options that you would rather see in the general fund list than water pieces, moving them out of the ARPA column and into the general fund column, it's just which ones are the best, and that I just landed there because that was the conversation through the ARPA and
got it. We're not gonna figure that out right now, so we'll have to get back to it.
no, but it does sort of help where we would get to the, to the 103 or the 104, whatever the amount was that we agreed on. Collectively between different.
there may be climate pieces that are better put into the general fund side. Maybe even the housing to VHCB, perhaps you'd rather do that in the general fund side as opposed to the ARPA side. Those are choices.
I understand the question, and I'm just not, we need to think about that in terms of what are the smarter ones to move.
The other is, are there some sort of like we understood with housing, that is, there are some expenditures that really lend themselves to general fund and ARPA puts more, so I don't know, in water quality, maybe there are some projects that in fact you want that general fund flexibility, or in other areas, so it's just how to make the numbers come out right and selecting which ones to swap.
And these are just yellow because of that. They're the sort of conversation starter on that one.
So, okay,
And that would lead to the cash fund conversation.
and that would finish up today. You wanna do that?
Unless the House has other documents.
Do you have other documents, Representative Cooper?
No, but maybe we can, oh, yes, I do, evidently. Oh, here's the cash fund, sorry.
You wanna do the cash fund now?
Yes, I would love to.
All right, okay. So, I'm gonna let Stephanie, as the drafter of this, she's taken sort of our discussions and tried to put it into some proposed language, and it's how we would structure this expenditure fund and then expand and add to it, because when we created it in the Senate, we had 1 and 2 and identified in terms of what the fund might consist of, and then the use of funds. So why don't you
Okay,
go
so
through
this takes the language that's in the Senate bill. And it's in E 106.1 where the cash fund is created. This amendment would include one other piece, which is that only appropriations is the only way to spend out of this fund. You wouldn't have excess receipts or anticipation of receipts as a way to have spending authority out of this fund. And so that's the only change in the creation of the fund.
Is this coming to us?
I just
But-
sent it. Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay. I'll wait a moment until it's popped up for the senators.
This is, yes, institutions. You're gonna have one.
Not necessarily.
Okay,
I mean, everyone's interested in everything, so.
No, wait, they say that's fund, it's their fund.
So Senator Westminster and Ruth, you're all set? You have a
Yep.
wrapped up?
all
Okay.
set.
So what you see, it's probably in yellow in the screen version that you see, is just adding in the creation of the fund, under the use of funds, the first sort of restriction is it can only be through enacted appropriations that money gets spent out of the fund. So that's in the creation of the fund. The Senate had also had a piece of session law that put a burden into the under the Commissioner of Finance in consultation with JFO about how to fund the fund. So that was what was in the Senate version. And what this would add is, in addition to how to fund the fund, how to prioritize the uses of the fund. And these are just my initial drafts of items that have been expressed a little bit over the past couple of days of potential use of the fund. But the question number one is, how do you prioritize the use of assuming that this fund has resources in it, how do you prioritize the use of those resources? And PCBs obviously are one conversation that's been happening in the halls. And so that's what's reflected here in the yellow as a starting point for a conversation about this fund. And a continued conversation tomorrow about whether or not there's contingent money to potentially seed the fund to begin with.
So thank you for this. As was noted, there have been a number of conversations in the halls about potential use. PCBs was only one of many possible uses, and I'm a bit concerned by saying that and maybe not the other ideas that were out there is signaling something. And I just want to be clear that there were a list of ideas on potential uses here, of which this was one.
So I think there's a mix of uses of, is it uses of the capital expenditure cash fund, or is it there are ideas related to the contingent list overall. But this was just me sort of putting some words on paper for this committee, for this conference committee to start to have a discussion and refine.
I understand that, and I'm very grateful to have a place to begin from. We all know that as people look at documents that we prepare, that folks assume that that is the direction we're traveling in. And again, I just want to be clear that PCB remediation is just one of a host of things that we have talked about that could be used for the capital expenditure fund. You know, we've talked about debt mitigation, which obviously we're doing in some other areas. We've talked about capitalizing some funds. There have been a variety of ideas that are out there. And I think we need to continue considering that variety of ideas and not assuming one direction or another.
Well, maybe the language has to be a bit more general than identifying one particular allowable use. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes.
And so what we're trying to do is think about once you create the fund, sort of, you know, should we prioritize in statute or should we, I mean, sometimes you put stuff in statute and the world changes and so you want to have maybe a little bit more flexibility. On the other hand, it's everything that's got to go through the General Assembly, and I would imagine we would want to have any proposed uses should be also, I think in the budget presentation.
Yeah, and I mean, even just, you know, like this year, does it happen in the operating budget? Does it happen in the capital budget? Does it?
Yeah.
Those are all unclear at this point on the use of the fund.
So this is just to start the conversation about if we create the fund, which I think there's agreement to do that, then what we want to put sort of as some framework around once it's created and the use of the fund. So I don't think we're going to decide that today. It's almost 4:30, so this is just throwing it out for people to cogitate, and we will come back to it tomorrow.
Stephanie?
Yeah.
Just wondering, you say it may only be used via enacted appropriations?
So as opposed to, on special funds, and this would be a special fund that you're creating, we do have the ability to anticipate receipts, and if there's a balance in the fund, the executive branch could, through that process, access the fund. What the language there is intended to do is to make sure that you are aware that the fund is being.
No, I get that. I'm just wondering if you need the word enacted.
Oh, actually, this, whatever you decide, this was me writing it as opposed to Becky Wasserman, so I will actually have her, as the drafter of this section of the bill, make, it probably is unnecessary.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a lot more work to do before we finalize it. This is the first step. And on that, I think we can, tomorrow, our goal as of now is to finish our work a week from tomorrow. I mean, I'm talking about the legislature to be finished its work. So our plan is to continue working on the money tomorrow and Friday, and Monday we will wrap it up and shake hands, and we are prepared to meet the Thursday adjournment date. And you'll be back in tomorrow, Senator Bruce and Senator
Yes,
Buckley?
I'll be there masked tomorrow.
Okay, what about you, Rich?
You're muted, Rich.
I probably won't be there till Friday.
All right, so with that, unless you have something else, Representative Cooper, I'm gonna adjourn the committee for today, and we should get back together tomorrow. We're on the floor again at 10.
We're on at 1. I have a handful of sections that we could run through if you wanted to maybe meet at 9
Okay,
and get some of that done.
yep, that sounds fine. So we'll meet at 9 tomorrow and go through if there's anything that we can close out, and then you go off, but you only go on the floor if you have a roll call vote, so we'll come back.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure I can make that work because I have to travel down in order to be there. And I had not been expecting that, so I've set up something at 8:30 tomorrow morning. So I don't want to hold people up, but
Well, what we can do is, it's not uncommon that 2 of the 3 of us, and if these are just sort of or closing out some non-controversial sections, and then you'll be here for the rest of the day.
okay,
If there's
sounds good.
anything in the sections that we think that would be a problem, we'll hold them open until you have a chance to come and take a look, and we'll brief you on the ones that we reviewed.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, so anything else? Otherwise, we will adjourn for today.
Okay, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow at 9.
9
Well,
o'clock,
no, yes, at 9.
Nine,
Yes.
yeah.
9 o'clock.